Thank you so much, Standa-san, for sharing your experience leading a diverse organization and also role modeling, leading an enjoyable and fun life for your employees, something we can all learn from. Also, to think about how flexibility really shifts people's ownership and how that can contribute to business success. Our next keynote, I'm delighted to invite Ms. Dengu Jibu-san to the stage, and this will give us another perspective on the importance of work style reform, looking at what is true work style reform and how can that generate a win-win for both organizations and employees. Jibu-san is a journalist and researcher at the Institute of Current Business Studies at Showa Women's University. She started her career as an editor at Nikkei Business Publications, and during her tenure there, she spent a year as a Fulbright scholar at the University of Michigan in the United States, while there doing research on child-raising practices of dual-income couples in the United States. She authored 2 books on this topic after returning to Japan. Now working as an independent journalist since 2014, Jibu-san has continued to investigate and highlight the issues of women's empowerment and the challenges of dual-income couples in raising children, with special attention to how government policies impact these areas, both of which are critical elements in today's theme of work style reform. So thank you so much, Jibu-san, for being with us today and sharing your insights around how we work and how companies can best engage employees for a win-win. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I practiced this phrase with my 5-year-old daughter last night because she has just begun English conversation. So I played YouTube again and again, and good afternoon and good morning. But actually, for the pronunciation of afternoon seemed to be a little bit difficult for her, and she hated the word afternoon. But anyway, I can say good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. It's my honor.
Now let me speak in Japanese. Today I'm going to talk about true work style reform. As has been mentioned by the previous speaker, the work style reform has been discussed a lot in Japan. In Nikkei newspaper today, there was an article about work style reform. Almost every day we see articles on work style reform on business newspapers and journals. How laws are going to be changed, how regulations are going to be changed in Japan. That's a very important issue for business leaders and companies. Why I put true work style reform to my title? Let me explain. There's been a lot of discussion. However, there's been some confusion as well in those discussions. For example, as has been discussed in Nikkei newspaper article today, one issue is the regulation of overtime. But just paying attention to work time is nonsense from the standpoint of productivity, as the previous speaker mentioned. And the same pay for same work or more flexible work style, there are many elements that we'll have to think about when we truly have to achieve work style reform. From the standpoint of business, what sort of change is required and what sort of change will lead us to win-win situation? Regulations and laws are there to protect the weak. So some kind of regulation is necessary to protect the weak. However, what's lacking from the discussion is how we can improve the productivity and how we can make employees happier and employers happier. Those are the elements that have been missing from the discussion about the work style reform. As has been introduced, I'm going to talk about from a standpoint of economist, I've interviewed so many people, like 1,000 people, from workers to company managements, and I've been writing to business journals as well. So based on those experiences, I'd like to have a talk. 10 years ago, I went to the US under Fulbright, and I interviewed about 50 couples. In Japan, since 10 years ago, the aging society has been a very big issue. The working population is decreasing in Japan, so how to deal with the situation has been a discussion in Japan. On the other hand, in the US, more than 40% of the managers are women, and the birth rate is higher in the US. So when I went to the US, I thought there has to be a magic in the US which enables women to work while having children. However, there was no such magic. In the US, it's more market-oriented in solving issues. Why women are having children while a career? Many women say that the key is flexibility. The flexibility is really the key. Back then in Japan, as to the promotion of women's career, child care support is the attention. However, in the US, there was already an awareness that the work style matters a lot. I wrote this book about 20 years ago, and I think this 20-year-old book is applicable to Japan now. So what is the true work style reform in Japan? Both employers and employees, both of them have to share the benefit and the cost. First of all, employees. Flexibility is the key. Flexibility brings the biggest benefit to the employees. I myself have 2 children. My schedule was very tight in terms of the schedule. So when I have a deadline, I had to work very hard and late. However, my work style was very flexible. So I could write while taking care of my children 3 a.m. at night. And even at the daytime, if I don't have any deadline, I can do many other things, even during daytime. Still, it's difficult for Japanese women to continue working, but I could do it because my working style was very flexible. On the other hand, in terms of the employers, what they want to obtain by work reform is productivity. They want to improve productivity by work style reform. And that topic has been discussed by the media, but what's missing from the media is cost, the cost element. Everyone here today are in the area of business. So I think that you understand that there is no free lunch. However, in the media discussion, there is no element of the cost. For example, from the standpoint of employees, if they can be more flexible, they will be questioned if they can be productive. If they cannot be productive, they are not given flexibility. And that also means that in the past they work from 9 to 5 or from 9 to 8. As long as they stay in the office, they were rewarded. But that's not true anymore. Even if you stay until 5 or 7 or 8, if you are not productive, you are not valued. So the employees have to have a good productivity if we want to have the flexible work hours. And as to the managers, I think all of you here work for progressive companies. So this issue may be not relevant to you, but your definition of the evaluation have to be changed. What is the productivity? What is the outcome? What is the quality or performance required for each job? I think many companies do not have clear definition of these things. And Japanese companies always have this challenge when there is a kacho, and if those managers don't have their subordinates in front of them, they cannot evaluate them. But if those managers cannot evaluate those subordinates, then those managers are not really qualified. Once they have flexible work hours, they may be working at home or they may be writing emails in the train or on vacation. So even if those subordinates are not in front of you, those managers have to have an ability to evaluate them. So the cost is something that's been missing from the discussion. Now, in terms of the work style reform discussion in Japan, there are 3 mistakes in Japan. Japanese work style reform is always about supporting women, and it's only about protecting working mothers. That's often the case in Japan. I think you may know Shiseido Shock. Shiseido is a very well-known company for good workplace for women. So there are many female workers and working mothers, especially for those sales staff at departments. They can work only at daytime. But that means that the single women and women without children have to work at night shift or early morning shifts, and that reduced the productivity. So recently, Shiseido sent a very clear message to their employees. And that message was for the working mothers to work the night shift and also the early morning shifts, and those working mothers will be rewarded. And what this means is that not only progressive support for the mothers is not enough for women to be successful in their career. And this has been made clear based on research. Dr. Yamaguchi of Chicago University, a sociologist, conducted this research. There is some statistics here. When he compared companies with the support for the mothers and for companies which is more fair both for male and female, when those 2 companies are compared, according to this research, companies which provides only mother support couldn't improve the productivity. But on the other hand, those companies which provided support both for men and female, the productivity increased. And there was a solid statistics. So if you are interested, please refer to his book written by Dr. Yamaguchi. And one other thing which is often observed in Japanese companies is unconscious bias in terms of the gender. For working mothers, there are many companies which provide support. But it's often the case that men are primary caregivers. And there is one case of a company which provides support for working mothers. And there was also a single father in this office. If there are both parents, it may be easier, but the company didn't provide any support for single father. So male or female doesn't matter in terms of care provider, because men can be a care provider as well. And at the right side, according to the research of the Cabinet Office, the male and female in their 30s and 40s, both of them want to take work-life balance, and 30% of them said yes, they want to take a right balance. So same number of men have this wish that they want to have work-life balance. However, those wishes of the men are often invisible, so they are not cared. And the third item We often pay attention to mothers. But life is not only about children. In the value of life is different depending on a person. Let me introduce a successful teleworker at a pharmaceutical company. There was a researcher without any kid, and this person works from home once a week. Because of this, she didn't get tired because of commuting, and because of less commuting, she could spend more time in cooking, and that made their personal life better, more satisfactory, and that is also good for her health, and her loyalty to the company improved. And the other case was about the elderly care. In Japan, as you know, it's an aging society, and there are many people who are caring their older parents, and 30% of those care providers are male. So those male care providers are spending a lot of time caring their parents or their spouses. So we have to be careful in many different kind of situations. So I have 5 proposals to you today. Number 1, both employees and employers, we have to create a win-win situation for both of them, and that's possible. We have to believe that it's possible. It's often the case that employees and employers are in conflict with each other, especially when it comes to flexible work hours. Because people often think that employers want to introduce flexible work hours so that they can let the workers work for longer hours. But really, we can create win-win situation. And second, there is also cost when we want to achieve something. If we want to improve productivity, or if we want to have flexible work hours, there are always the costs. So we always have to think about what sort of costs we want to pay. And also, we have to redesign evaluation system. Introducing new things or a new system require cost, and it's maybe cumbersome, but we have to think longer term benefit. And lastly, you may be working for progressive companies. So not only your companies alone, but also please think about changing the work style in your partner companies or your associate companies. In many companies, SDGs, I think you are talking about SDGs, what your companies can do for SDG. This is a sustainable development goal to be achieved by 2030. And number 8 is decent work and economic growth. This is closely related to work style reform. There are 17 items and sub-items under it. And I picked up 2 things which are related to work style reform. One is equality, and 17.6 is partnerships for the goals. In SDGs, developed nations have to be proactive in dealing with the situation. The UN considers companies as important actors. By having work style reform, what sort of benefits you have obtained, or what sort of things it required to achieve the work style reform. And those outcomes, please do communicate your cases or experiences. And smaller companies, your partner companies may be less progressive as compared to your companies. Please encourage them to make changes in their companies as well. Thank you very much.